Every single time we see an athletic forward get moved to a more favorable team situation and drastically improve, it really makes you wonder how many are out there. Just think about Andrew Wiggins. He was viewed as an empty calorie scorer only to get moved to the Warriors, where he played a vital role in a championship, with most of his impact coming on the defensive end. Pretty much the same script could be written for Aaron Gordon, who spent years on a middling Magic team where nobody really mentioned his name outside of the dunk contest, and he's now one of the most valued role players in basketball for a potential back-to-back champion. The reason I bring this up is because right now in that very same conference, we're seeing a really similar arc for none other than PJ Washington. When the Mavs first traded for PJ, it was pretty clearly a move meant to bring more defensive versatility to the roster, and that has more than been fulfilled. He's a really unique athlete in that he's listed at 6'7", so the size of a wing, and that's really how he moves, but he pairs that with a 7'3" wingspan and incredible core strength, so he's basically been their ultimate defensive chess piece for any tough matchup. During the Clippers series, he spent most of his time defending Paul George, and his physical tools played a big role in not letting PG get anywhere near the rim. Against OKC, it's been Shea, and the Mavs have been really overloading the paint with help to take away drives, so PJ doesn't have to do as much work, but it's still his job to not give up anything in the mid-range, and he's done that very well, sliding his feet laterally, absorbing contact, and using his length to at least make these shots a little bit tougher. When Shea's on the bench, he's likely guarding Jalen Williams, and most of the same concepts still apply, as he just has to simply hold his own out in space. In addition to the wings, he's also spent a decent amount of time on Chet Holmgren, where his role is less about isolation and more about executing as a help and recover guy. While I just made him out to sound like some defensive player of the year candidate, I do think it's important to mention that he's not flawless. That really stood out whenever he had to defend James Harden. Don't get me wrong, his constant full court pressure definitely made an impact on LA's offense, but on these plays is where it really stood out how much of a foot speed difference there is between PJ and what you typically want in a point of attack defender. When they weren't loading up early, Harden had no trouble consistently beating him off the dribble, which is exactly what he did time and time again down the stretch of a tight Game 4. I think that also hurts him when ball handlers start to come off screens, as they can get by his hit pretty consistently, although I will say he's pretty good at using his length to stay attached while leading the ball into one of his shot blockers. And in general, I think his athletic tools really stand out when he's forced into recovery. Harden has him completely beat here, yet he's still able to get a hand on the floater. That athleticism also stands out whenever he's away from the ball, especially around the rim. He's not a big-time shot blocker or even a super valuable rim protector for that matter, but he's at the very least a vertical presence, and that can make a difference. Well, it certainly has so far in these playoffs, because he's contested 52 shots within 6 feet, and players have shot nearly 12% below their expected average. Now that's obviously a smaller sample, so it's probably more valuable to look at, say, the last 2 seasons, where players have shot about 3% worse on over 800 attempts. It's clear to me that his length, strength, and verticality do help him alter shots around the basket, even if it is as a second or third guy, and that's more than a lot of point of attack defenders around the league can say. You pair that with his versatile on-ball defense, and it starts to become clear why the Mavs, and really all Mavs fans, value him so highly. The thing is, his impact doesn't stop there. Actually, one of the main reasons he's being talked about right now is because in games 2 and 3 of the Thunder series, he averaged 28 points per game, outscoring both Luka and Kyrie as they've jumped out to a 2-1 lead. As I mentioned earlier, PJ's a pretty impressive athlete. He's quick on his feet, incredibly lengthy, can get above the rim, and all of these things make him a decent weapon in transition. He's constantly looking for opportunities to get out and run, whether that's by leaking out for long passes or streaking alongside one of their primary ball handlers. Fast breaks only account for a small portion of the Mavericks offense though, and in the half court, his role is very simple. Almost all of his time is spent spotting up along the perimeter, so a pretty big key in his offensive value is simply whether or not the shot is falling. Over the first 5 games of the playoffs, he was on the bad end of that spectrum, hitting just 25% of his 24 three-pointers. But in 4 games since then, he's hit a scorching 52.9%, which has corresponded with a huge increase in volume, attempting 8.5 per game. That was the catalyst in his huge performances over games 2 and 3, shooting a combined 12 of 23 from outside. Obviously, that level of shot making won't be sustained for an entire run, but it's important to note that by design, OKC's defensive scheme has been to intentionally give up open threes, and Washington's shown to be a guy who will take advantage of those opportunities. In particular, he's been punishing the defense from the corner, which has actually been a huge change for him, as that's never really been his role in the NBA. Here's a look at the percentage of his three-point attempts that come from the corner each year. He peaked as a rookie at about 27% and consistently landed somewhere in the low to mid-20s. And here's where he's been during the 2024 playoffs, up to almost 60%. This is the shortest three on the court, and as he's been intentionally left open, he's been able to catch a rhythm. It's now getting to a point where OKC is going to have to adjust, because over the 9 total playoff games, he's up to 41.4% on his threes while attempting more than 6 a game. With all of that said, what makes PJ such a valuable role player on offense isn't just the fact that he can knock down open threes. For years, those were the type of guys we saw surrounding Luka, 3-and-D forwards who could spot up, maybe hit 40% of their threes, but their offensive game stopped there. PJ is different. During his time in Charlotte, he had multiple 40-point games where there were flashes of serious offensive talent, and he's found ways to translate that into competitive basketball by playing off the catch. Because guys like Luka and Kyrie are going to consistently put the defense in rotation, it's on those supporting players to make the right decisions. On this one, he first looks to swing the ball, but sees that Zubac has it covered, so he instead jabs right into a drive left, where he's able to muscle his way to the rim for 2. He's pretty good at reading closeouts and decisively attacking. The pass is carrying his momentum right, and he knows that Harden will react, so he drives left, and with no path to the rim, he stops short for a floater. That floater isn't just a counter for him, it's actually his go-to shot in these situations, and it's really effective. Over the last 2 seasons, he's hit 45% of his attempts from 3 to 10 feet, or what many refer to as the short mid-range, which is a pretty good mark, but he's taken it to another notch in the playoffs, up to nearly 53%. The reason this is so important is that it adds another dimension to his scoring. Whereas a lot of guys who play off the catch are only a threat to score if they get to the rim, when a shot blocker like Chet steps in front of him, he can still produce a good shot. So whenever he beats a closeout, that extra help has to meet him early. Here he's about to set it up when he sees that Kleba's wide open in the corner, and that simple extra pass keeps the defense in a scramble. By no means is he some high-level playmaker. He will make the right finds when needed though. This time he's going to stampede into open space on a drive, to which he draws 2 and lobs it up to Lively for easy points. And because he has these layers to his game off the catch, Dallas can involve him in more offensive action. For example, he'll sometimes screen for Luka, and when the Clippers put 2 on the ball, he's able to take advantage of that 4-on-3 by stepping into one of his floaters. This time he's going to screen for Kyrie, and it's the same thing with 2 on the ball, although when he catches, it's not quite as straightforward. This is when proper decision making is required, and he surveys the floor before finding Luka across the court, who's got some space to step into a 3. Another thing you'll see is that when needed, he can also punish switches. Again, it starts with the screen and 2 on Luka, then when Norman Powell picks him up early, he just plays with his back to the basket and works his way in close for a bucket. Obviously, he's not a guy who's going to be creating much offense. He does have some utility as a legitimate scoring option though. Against smaller players, he likes to seal off low post position, where he'll use his athletic advantage to get into a quick scoring move. And in the first quarter of Game 3 against the Thunder, he really took advantage of the Josh Giddey matchup. This time it's a post-up, and he has no trouble at all creating a good look. Then on this one, he's going to start from a touch further, attack on a baseline drive, drawing 2 and dropping it off to Gafford, who fakes Chet out of his shoes for some easy points. Through 9 games, PJ has pretty clearly solidified himself as the offensive number 3. 14.6 points per game might not sound like much, but it's a pretty clear step up from everyone else on the roster outside of the obvious 2, as nobody even reaches double figures. He's doing this on solid efficiency, nearly 60% true shooting, and without taking away any touches from the superstar duo. To me, that's some decent value, and when you take into consideration that he's also one of, if not their most important defender, especially on the ball, we're talking about a truly great complementary piece and yet another case of a new situation completely shifting the narrative on a player. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Washington. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.